Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we have a little bit of a special video. This one is going to be my Christmas Day 2019 beer review. So to those of you who have watched the channel over the last year, I just want to wish you a very Merry Christmas 2019 with all your family and friends. The support you've shown the channel over the last year has been great. I've managed to drink a lot of really nice beers and a lot of nice sakes and whiskies and things like that as well, which is always a little bit of a bonus. So this Christmas has been a little bit special for me because my son was just born about 3 weeks before this video will air, and I've had a really great time with that. You know, my family came across to Japan, my parents to meet their grandson, my sister to meet their nephew, and I've had a very good time with Michiko's family as well. It's been really cool just to see everyone get together and meet each other and have a good time with the baby and things like that. So a new chapter of life, and hopefully it kind of continues to go as well as it has done so far. But as I always do for these kind of special day reviews on the channel, I've got a really kind of nice beer to have a look at today. This one comes to you from one of my favourite craft breweries here in Japan, and it was also a Christmas present from Michiko, and she was good enough to give me it a couple of days early so I could review it for you guys watching the channel. So for this one then, we are going to go to Nagano Prefecture once again, and we're having a taste of another beer from Shiga Kogen beer, whose parent company of course is Tamamura Honten. And this one is a bit of a beast by all accounts. This one is the Isseki Sancho, which is an Imperial Black Saison, barrel-aged in Japanese whiskey barrels, coming in at 12% ABV. So a very unusual beer, this one, and a little bit of a monster to boot. So really curious to see how this one turns out. There's a bit of a story behind this beer, which I'll tell you later on in the video, but I hope that you guys enjoy it, and I am very, very curious about this one, I have to say. This is another beer that was picked up at liquor shop Asahiya in Taishibashi Yamaichi here in Osaka. This is one that Koji and Rika kept aside for me, so make sure you check out the link to their Facebook page in the description below. They've always got some really interesting beers coming in from all across Japan and from further afield as well, so check them out if you do find yourself here in Osaka. This is where I pretty much get all of my Japanese beers from. But as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer, and we'll see how we get on with this one. So as always, we'll talk about that a little bit. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Tamamura Honten and Shiga Kogen beer before. No doubt I will add some more in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Japanese beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Tamamura Honten then, on to my brewery notes, or Tamamura Honten and Shiga Kogen beer, I guess I should say. So Tamamura Honten are based in Yamanouchi City in Nagano Prefecture in Japan, which you can find a few hundred kilometers to the northwest of Tokyo. So this area is particularly well known for its ski slopes and for its hot springs, and you will also find some very good Japanese sake from Nagano as well. But the Tamamura Honten company began brewing sake back in 1805, and they also recently began brewing beer under the name Shiga Kogen beer, which literally translates into English as Shiga Heights or Shiga Mountain beer. They started brewing their beers in 1998, just a little bit after the alcohol laws were liberalised in Japan. It was all about how much volume you could brew, and they lowered the volume that you could legally brew at, so you had a lot of little G-Biru breweries and craft breweries starting up around 1996, 1997, and these guys, interestingly enough, also produce wine as well, which I'm told is definitely worth trying. I need to try some of the Tamamura Honten sakes as well, because that's something I would really love to do for you here on the channel. But the current head brewer at the brewery is Sato Eigo. He joined the company back in 2003, and the idea to brew beer came apparently when the number of skiers that were visiting the resort began to dwindle, and so in May of 2004 they applied for a brewing license, and they received it 4 months later. They brought their brewing equipment in, they trained for a week at a brewery in Kyushu, and they began their own commercial activities with only a consultant to help them get up and running. But they've gone on to become one of the most decorated and well-known craft breweries in Japan, and these guys do produce some of the best craft beers in Japan, in my humble opinion. But Tamamura Honten produce their own hops, they produce their own sake rice as well, barley, buckwheat and also blueberries are in their inventory too. They actually have their own hop variety which is called Shinzu Wazi, and this apparently is a hybrid between Czech Sats and a local variety of Japanese hop. It was originally used as a bittering hop for lager beers, but they now use it as an aroma hop as well. So in things like their house IPA, you will find a little bit of that Shinzu Wazi hop. That's a beer that I really do need to review for you on the channel at some point too, because it's quite widely distributed throughout Japan these days. It tends to be the more special beers that I review for you from Shiga Kogen and Tamamura Honten. But the brewery also has 2 tasting rooms as well. These are known as tepper rooms. There's one at the actual brewery and also one at the Shiga Kogen Ichinose Hotel Chalet Shiga as well, which is somewhere that I do hope to visit at some point too. But the artwork you'll find on the bottles, of course, is very distinctive, and it is designed by Tanaka Noriyuki. And these guys, like I say, are one of the best known craft brews in Japan. They're pretty prolific as well. At the time of reviewing this this particular beer, they've produced in the region of about 150 to 200 different beers in their sort of, I guess, about 20 years existence. This brewery are now 22 years old, which is pretty impressive. And that probably goes to show you why they are one of the highest quality and best known craft breweries in Japan. But again, you're not really going to find these beers outside of Japan. If some of you have found them outside of Japan, do let me know in the comment section below. That would be really interesting to know about this brewery. But as far as I know, you can really only get these beers at the good craft beer shops here in Japan. That's the one problem with Japan, of course. A lot of their products are very, very regional. And in some ways it's a good thing, because you can always find you know, real treasure troves of stuff when you go and visit different parts of Japan. But for actually you know, distribution and things like that, it's a little bit annoying, because there are, you know, you will find good stuff in different places in Japan, but if I come to Osaka, I can't get something good from, say, Akita Prefecture or whatever. So it has its plus points and it has its downsides as well. But this is a very good brewery and one of the Japanese breweries that I really recommend that you could check out. The barrels that they use for aging this particular beer, of course, come to you from the Chichibu Distillery. This comes to you from Chichibu City in Saitama Prefecture in Japan, and it was founded back in 2004, and apparently it was the first new distillery in Japan as well since 1973. And Japanese whiskey does have a very good reputation as well, and as a Scot I can tell you that that is quite justified in my humble opinion too. So yeah, a really interesting brewery this one, and one that you definitely need to check out if you're interested in Japanese craft beer. So that's all you really need to know about Tamamura Honten and their Shiga Kogen beer range just now. This is common in Japan, of course. There tends to be a parent company, in this case Tamamura Honten, and they tend to sell their beers under a certain brand name, in this case Shiga Kogen beer. And you'll find that with many, many breweries across the country. But yeah, that's all you need to know about them just now. If you want to learn more, of course, you can check out the brewery website in the description below. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And of course, you can check out the Rate Beer and Untappd pages to see all the different things that they've done. So yeah, let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer itself then. So as I mentioned to you at the start of the video, this one is a 12% Imperial Black Saison, and it's aged in whiskey barrels from the Chichibu Distillery. Now, a few years ago, 2016-2017, they did a beer, a collaboration with Dieu de Seal, who are from over in Quebec in Canada, and that was called Isseki Sancho. The story behind this particular beer is that they had a few barrels of this aging in the brewery, and they simply forgot about it. And it just surfaced quite recently, and they released about 3,400 bottles of this one or something like that. They found the barrels, they tasted the beer, found it was good, and decided to release it. From what Michiko tells me, the story behind the name of this one is that in Japanese there's a saying called Isseki Sancho, and that essentially means that if you do something, you get 2 benefits from it. So in this case, this one is Isseki Sancho, Ichi ni san, 1 2 3. So it means that they've done one thing and got 3 benefits out of it. They've done their collaboration with this Canadian brewery. That brewery, of course, there was 2 breweries involved, Isseki Sancho, and then they've discovered these barrels that they forgot about in the brewery. Therefore, there's your 3rd benefit, Isseki Sancho. So quite a cool name for this one, actually. I'll need to make sure I put the kanjis for stuff like that in the description below. But a really cool name. You would have seen me review that beer as well. If I remember correctly, that might have been review number like 750. or something like that. It was one of the first ones that I filmed during my longer stay here in Osaka back in, was it 2016? I think it was 2016. So I reviewed the first batch of that beer. They brewed a second batch of it. So maybe that's another place where the san comes from as well. They brewed 2 batches of that original Isseki Sancho, one in 2016 and one in 2017, from what I understand. So yeah, pretty cool, I have to say. So if you get the chance to try this one, it's very, very limited. So I really recommend that you do. You'll probably only find this beer in Japan, I would think. So from what I gather, this one wasn't actually a collaboration. They used the recipe that they did with Judicial at one point too, but definitely cool to come across something this rare for my Christmas Day review. So yeah, let's get on and actually taste this one. I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork of this before we open up. There you can see, if we bring it into the camera, there is the Tamamura Honten dragon. You can see here's the symbol for the Chichibu Distillery and their Ichiro malt range that they do, Ichiro malt range of sake, and there you can see there is the Isseki Sancho kanjis, which is very cool. This one of course has the standard Tamamura Honten bottle cap on this one, and it does tell you the date of Tamamura Honten, since 1805. So these guys are a little bit older than some of the other sake brewers. They're not the oldest by any stretch of the imagination. Some of them go back to like the 1500s and 1600s, but these guys are a little bit older than most. A good number of the sake breweries started up around the time of the Meiji Restoration, which was either 1867 or 1872. I always forget the exact year of that. But yeah, 12% Imperial Black Saison, and aged in whiskey barrels from Ichiro Malt at Chichibu Distillery in Saitama. So without further ado then, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. I am very, very curious to see how this particular beer turns out. Nice little bit of smoke on the opening then, and let's get this one out and into the glass. And I have to say, I will definitely be keeping the bottle of this one, because you know this is a pretty damn special beer. It's not often at all that you come across a black saison, not to mention you know, an imperial black saison, and one that's aged in Japanese whiskey barrels. This one is a pretty damn special beer by any stretch of the imagination, in my humble opinion. So yeah, as you can see with this one, and as you would kind of expect when it's called a black saison, it's poured a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. If I hold this one up to the light, there is a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola coloured edge to this one, but to be honest with you, this beer is pretty much black as night. There was a little bit of a quarter finger of a frothy, I would say medium beige head on this one. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones heading up towards the bottom of that head, but the head has just faded away to be a very, very thin foamy layer. So nothing overly surprising about this beer when you consider what kind of style it is and things like that. It is kind of what you would expect, but it looks very, very nice. That's mainly what we can say about the appearance of this beer. So yeah, let's take a closer look at that aroma then and just see how we go on. I think this aroma will be pretty unusual actually. Oh, straight away with this one, you can smell the whiskey with this beer. And it's quite interesting because, you know, when you barrel age something, what often, or at least when you barrel age beer, what quite often happens is that the body of the beer will thin out a little bit, and it will give you this very, very infused flavour. You get a lot of woody notes, even sometimes leather, and sometimes like some cherry notes and things like that as well, but you can really, really smell the whiskey in this one. And the whiskey notes that come out of this, there's a good bit of like brown sugar to them. There's a good little bit of a kind of oaky vanilla note in there as well. But I think there's a little bit of an almost peaty quality in there. As I've told you before in the whiskey reviews, you tend to get sweet whiskies, you can get citrusy ones, spicy ones, and also more of the kind of smoky ones. But the whiskey notes that come out of this one for me are a little bit more, it's a combination of a kind of sweet brown sugary type whiskey and also just a little bit peaty for me. So that's kind of interesting. A lot of woody notes to this beer. It's almost a little bit leathery in terms of its aroma as well actually. So yeah, the whiskey notes really dominate the first impression when it comes to the aroma of this beer. That's a beautiful smelling beer. This is definitely one of the kind of, you know, I've reviewed about 2,000 beers for you here on the channel now, and I will just say straight up, this one is pretty damn special. So if you do come across a bottle of this, do buy it. I think it was about 1200 yen, this one, 1200 yen, which is about 12 euros. No, not that much, maybe about 9 euros, something like that. It's about, yeah, it's maybe, I'm thinking, that's maybe about £9, £9 UK pounds, which would make it like, you know, 10.50, 11 euros, something like that. So about 110, 120 Swedish crowns, something like that for this beer. But, you know, when you come across something as special and as unusual as this, then it's definitely worth it. And just trust me on this, this brewery is one that definitely kind of warrants that price tag in my experience. I've had some really good beers from these guys over the years, but the whiskey notes in this are absolutely beautiful. And some videos I've often questioned the need for barrel aging and stuff, but I can just tell with this, I think this is going to be one of the special reviews on the channel actually. High hopes for this. But yeah, lovely brown sugary notes from the whiskey. You can definitely pick up that oaky vanilla note that I'm talking about. A little bit of a wheaty character in there as well. On top of that, you do get some of the kind of doughy, bready, yeasty things that you would expect of a Saison. The Saison, of course, is a Belgian style of beer. And I think, if I remember correctly, it was the Saison was the one that the farmers used to brew for themselves. The Saison farmhouse beer. So you can pick up some of that nice kind of bready, doughy note in there. There's definitely a little bit of a black malt in there, which you'd expect when it's an Imperial black Saison. The brown sugars, as I say, they're really kind of whiskey based actually, but it's a little bit it's almost like a very highly caramelised treacle, something like that. I suspect that this beer's had a pretty long boil before it's gone into the barrels, you know. And the more that you boil a beer, or you boil the wort rather, the more caramelised the sugars become, and you can tell with the aroma of this beer just how kind of thick and caramelised the sugars in this particular beer must have been. That of course affects the colour of the beer as well. But yeah, the malty side of this beer is just insane. This is crazy. I don't know how long this has been in the barrels. It must be about like 2-3 years, something like that. The last batch of the Isseki Sancho was 2017, so it's either from 2016 or 2017, 2 or 3 years in the barrel. And it's quite cool that they decided to release it for Christmas 2019, I have to say. But the doughy bready notes in this, you do get a little bit of it. It's quite subtle because of how strong the other characteristics of the beer are. But to be honest, there's pretty much no hoppy character to this, and that's what you'd expect. After 2 or 3 years in the barrel, the hops are going to drop away. There's probably just a little teeny bit of earthiness and a little bit of grassiness coming out of this one. On the fruity side of things, there's some really interesting stuff going on. You've definitely got a little bit of a kind of sort of pruny or kind of datey type thing going on with this one. There's definitely a nice little bit of a kind of boozy red fruit in this one. This beer in some ways, it smells a little bit like Christmas cake in some ways. My dad absolutely loves Christmas cake. We always used to have it for his birthday in February. My mum used to, you know, make a special batch of it for him. So some of the aromas in this beer, it comes across as quite cakey in some respects because of the bready, yeasty notes. Belgian beer, of course, is all about the yeast. But you really get that kind of cakey, Christmas cakey note out of it. So some almost like really dark cherry notes, some pruny notes, a little bit of a datey quality like I said as well, but you also get some of the kind of juicier blackberries, blackcurrants, figgy notes that you would expect of a dark beer like this as well. I've no idea what hops they would have used in this actually, but it would be really interesting to know. It might even have some of that Ichinose hop or Shinzuwazi rather, the Shinzuwazi hop that's their own one. That maybe makes this beer even just a little bit more unique actually. But the aroma of this beer, I have to say, is a little bit special. I mean, there's even a little bit of that kind of phenolic quality that you get from Belgian beers as well, that sort of cough syrupy medicinal type thing. You know, straight up with this beer, you are going to find very, very few beers that have an aroma as unusual and as kind of inviting and special as this. I think this one really ticks a lot of boxes for me. So like I said, if you do happen to come across this beer, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma before you actually taste this. And this one, share it with friends. A very, very good brewery and a beer that is pretty damn rare, as I say. So let's have a look at this one then and see how we go on. This one is the Isseki Sancho from the Shiga Kogen beer range at Tamamura Honten in Yamanouchi in Nagano Prefecture here in Japan. My Christmas Day review 2019. A very Merry Christmas to you guys that have watched the channel. A huge thank you to Michiko for buying this one for me for my Christmas, and hopefully this is going to be a good beer. An Imperial Saison at 12% ABV, barrel aged in Japanese whiskey barrels from the Chichibu Distillery in Saitama here in Japan. Let's get stuck in. Slanja, Skål, Kampai. Yeah, all those predictions I made about this beer, all the predictions I made about this beer have pretty much kind of come true, to be honest with you. And my son's crying, he maybe wants some of it. But yeah, this is a really damn special beer. This, if you get the chance to try this, have a go at it. Let's just try and break the flavour of this one down for you then. So. Oh dear, that sounds a little bit bad, but Michiko seems to have them. So, yeah, straight away with this beer then, you can detect a little bit of that kind of toasty black malt just blanketing the middle of your palate. On top of that, you get some really nice kind of woody notes. You can really feel that oaky, woody quality from the whiskey barrels kind of coming into that. That very infused flavour, that really forms the kind of linchpin of the beer. But some of the roasty black malts in there come across really quite nicely. They're probably the inside of the thing with the whiskey barrels as well is they tend to char the inside of them before they put the whiskey in, so probably some of the roasty qualities in this beer are coming from that as well. A mixture of black malt and the charring of the inside of the whiskey barrels. But yeah, that woody oaky note, that blankets the middle of your tongue. You can feel, as the aroma was kind of suggesting, the whiskey notes that come out of this, it's a balance between being a little bit peaty but also being a little bit more kind of brown sugary. That you can really feel a bit of brown sugar on top of that oaky vanilla wood kind of quality there in the middle of your palate too. I think it's a little bit more vanilla like towards the front of the palate, and the brown sugars come out a little bit more on the kind of sides of the palate, which is really interesting. In the middle of your palate though, the brown sugars really come to the fore a little bit more. They're a little bit kind of lighter and more wafery and biscuity on the sides of the palate, but in the centre of your tongue, that's where you're going to get most of the boozy qualities out of this beer. So you can really pick that up with this one. That really kind of sits there in the middle of the palate, and it's almost a little bit, the woody notes, it almost dries out a little bit in the aftertaste as well, which is quite good. But yeah, that's you know, that's really, it's a really kind of interesting beer, this one, I have to say. Just the way all of these flavours go together, it's definitely one of these ones that is all about the balance between things. It's almost like Japanese society in a way. You've got to keep the balance with the wa and stuff like this. Actually, I really like how this kind of all goes together. This is really quite nice. You know, it's, as I say, on the channel, on this YouTube channel, you review some really special beers. This one is definitely one of those. It's one that really gets you thinking a little bit, but it's just really well done. There's almost a little bit of a kind of leathery quality to this beer. If you go to the very centre of your palate and move forward a little bit, it's got a little bit of that leathery kind of undertone to it. There's some nice kind of cakey type flavours there as well. It is almost a little bit kind of like Christmas pudding. The thing I would say about this that's a little bit unusual is, as I was mentioning earlier, the Saison is a Belgian style beer, a sort of farmhouse beer, and usually these are big kind of doughy, bready, yeasty kind of things. But when you barrel age a beer, it really thins the body of the beer down a little bit, and at the expense of giving you those kind of more infused flavours. You don't get too much of a kind of bready quality to this. You get a little bit of it in the sort of centre of your palate, but not overly much. I mean, for me, the Saison side of this beer is more about the kind of toasty black malt that comes out of here. There's a little bit of the peaty quality that I was picking up in the aroma as well. You can get that if you go towards the very back corners of your palate, then move in a little bit. You will detect little bits of a kind of peaty note to the beer, but that really is not as prominent as the aroma might have you believe, actually. But this is a beer that has kind of so much going on in it. but it still manages to find a really, really good balance. So one of the main reasons to try this beer would just be about how unusual it is. As I said, an Imperial Black Saison is not a style you're going to come across every day, and you know, you're not going to come across one aged in Japanese whiskey barrels from anywhere else, to be honest with you. This is a pretty much a one-off beer review for you here on the channel, which is great. I love it. But yeah, that's awesome. I really like how this goes together. I think we've covered the kind of malty side of this beer pretty well, to be honest with you. In the back corners of the palate then, you can pick up a little bit of earthiness from what remains of the hoppy character, and that smoothens out a little bit as you come further forward along the sides of the palate. There's absolutely, you know, it remains earthy until pretty much the front corners of the tongue. Maybe around the front curve of the palate there's a little bit of a lighter kind of grassy thing going on in there, but you know, after about 2 or 3 years in the barrel, the hops are going to be pretty much all gone in this one. There's no real question about that. Behind the front curve of the palate, of course, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters start to push their way out of the beer, and this one has some really, really interesting things going on. Yeah, so it makes a really interesting transition, this one. When you take the beer in, it's a little bit like sharp and cherryish, but also at the same time it's quite juicy and prune-like, if that makes sense. You get a real bit of juicy fruity quality there at the beginning of this beer, but then the further you go into the aftertaste with this one, the fruits they sort of transition to a more blackberry-ish, blackcurranty, figgy type thing, and those come out more on the kind of tip of the palate. So sharper in the beginning, like I said. Some of the cakey flavours come out in the aftertaste as well. The sort of cakey flavours linger there the further you go into the aftertaste, along with the sort of oaky and woody notes that are underpinning the beer. The black malt, I should say as well, it's quite smooth actually. It does have an element of toastiness to it and a bit of dryness, but it really is smoothened out by the woody and whisk and sort of brown sugary infused notes that you have to this beer as well. But yeah, the fruitiness, like I said, if you go to the back of that oily bubble, it's got the cherries that I was picking up in the aroma. There's a little bit of that there at the very back of the fruity side of the beer, but as you move further forward, it gets a little bit more datey, pruny and things like that, and then as you reach the front part of the palate, it's definitely more kind of blackcurranty and blackberry. I don't know if figs is quite the right description for it actually. I'd say it's more blackcurranty and blackberryish, but the cakey flavours do seem to kind of creep forward a little bit on that, into that fruity side of the beer as well, which is or the fruity part of the palate, I guess I should say. It's a really interesting concoction, this beer. I've never come across anything quite like this, and this is what the channel is all about, for finding beers that are really quite as random as this one. So this is one that you definitely need to try, both for the quality of the beer but also just for the kind of sheer randomness of it. This is an awesome beer, and I take my hat off once again to Tamamura Honten and Shiga Kogen. Sato Eigo is really well regarded in Japan, and you can see why when he produces beers like this. And this is, you know, is this the best one I've had from them? I'm really not quite sure, because I've had some really awesome beers from these guys over the years. It's difficult to say, but this is definitely the most quirky one that I've had from this brewery so far. That's definitely a fair statement to make, but you know, I can't speak highly enough of this brewery. If you want to try some Japanese beers, Shiga Kogen beer are definitely a very good place to start. Let's just say that about this one. This is an awesome beer, very unusual style. And the novelty of this, you know, if you look at this beer in the shop, the novelty that you might think to buy this one, it's not going to let you down at all. It's definitely worth picking up this one, even with that kind of 1200 yen price tag. So yeah, and 1200 yen, in fairness, compared to other European breweries and American breweries and stuff like that, is a pretty damn good price, I have to say too. And beer tends to be more expensive in Asia as well. That's another point to make about this too. So in terms of the mouthfeel of this one then, I'd say it's at the top end of mid-bodied. I always find barrel-aged beers are a lot lighter in the bodies than they would be if you didn't barrel-age them, and, you know, stating the obvious perhaps, but this beer for me is at the top end of mid-bodied, maybe the bottom end of full-bodied at a push. Carbonation is very, very smooth. The mouthfeel overall, it's quite, you know, it is really just very, very smooth, this one. It's not oily. It does have an element of oiliness to it and also an element of wetness, but it's not the most oily beer you're going to come across, to be honest. It comes across as very clean, and when you're talking about a prefecture like Nagano, it's a lot of mountain water and stuff like that. You are going to get a very good quality of water up there. I'm particularly sensitive to that as a Scot, of course, because we always talk about water quality when it comes to whisky, and especially with Scandinavian beers as well, the Swedish, Norwegian and Icelandic beers and things like that, you know, and Scottish beers too have a very good quality of water. It's something that I really pick up on in beers, and you can definitely pick up a sort of clean or cleanliness aspect to this mouthfeel, I guess you could say. It's a really nice, clean, but very flavourful beer, I think you could say. In terms of the IBU count and bitter side of things, it's hard to place on this one. I think you're maybe talking about maybe 25 IBUs. It's somewhere in that kind of region. It's not going to blow the head off you in terms of bitterness. There is a little bit of bitterness from the black malts that are in here, but I think generally this is a very, very smooth and quite slick beer. On the hoppy side of things, again, it's a lot of the hoppy quality has dropped. So that's meaning, you know, that really means you're not going to get a lot of IBUs out of this. But on the malty side of things, it's very, very smooth. There's an element of sweetness to it, but the sweetness and the toastiness in this beer really balance out very well. And I think the barrel aging effect really infuses everything together. It's got a great balance between the smoothness and the sweetness and all the infused flavours, to be honest with you. In terms of the fruitiness, it's a little bit sharp in the beginning, but then it rolls out of the tongue and just becomes that little bit more kind of juicy the further you go into the aftertaste as well. I really like how all of that kind of goes together with this one. It does have a little bit of alcohol warmth to it. Not as much as you might expect from 12%, but I can feel it going to my head a little bit now, which is maybe turning this review into a bit of a ramble, but overall, as I say, this is a very, very good beer. The novelty factor you might think would come into play with this beer if you looked at it in the shop. You know, just overlook that. Buy this beer because it's from a very good brewery, and the beer itself is really pretty damn special, I have to say as well. I've had some really good beers from this brewery over the years. This is definitely one of the more quirky ones. I couldn't tell you whether it's the best one I've had, but it really is a pretty damn good beer, and this has been quite a special beer to review for you, I think. So let's just leave it at that. A really, really interesting beer, this one, and definitely one that you want to check out if you get the chance. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this. This is the Isseki Sancho, a 12% barrel-aged Imperial Black Saison from Shiga Kogen beer, part of the Tamamura Honten company in Nagano Prefecture, Yamanouchi City to be specific, to the northwest of Tokyo here in Japan. An awesome beer, and definitely a very cool one to review for my Christmas Day beer review 2019. So yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Tamamura Honten and Shiga Kogen beer. Hopefully I can review some of their sakes and things like that in the future, and some of their wines. I think, you know, it'd be cool to do some Japanese wine reviews for you, because I think that's another very underappreciated or unappreciated thing in the world. The Japanese wines are great quality, so maybe you'll see some of that in the future as well. But definitely check out this brewery and check out my other Japanese beer reviews as well. It's a little bit of an unknown world, Japanese craft beer, but you will find some very, very good things over here. But this one was the Isseki Sancho, a 12% Imperial Black Saison, barrel-aged in Chichibu Whisky Distillery's barrels from Saitama Prefecture, but this beer comes to you from Nagano Prefecture in Japan. Awesome beer to review for my Christmas Day beer review. Big thank you to Michiko, and a big shout out to Koji and Rika at Liquor Shop Asahiya here in Osaka too. Until the next time, slange just now, and I'll catch you guys soon. I hope you continue to enjoy this Japanese mini-series. There's a lot of nice beer reviews for you to come. Until the next time, slange just now, I'll catch you guys later. Make sure you check out this brewery and check out my social media and things like that as well. Slange, skull, kampai, make sure you have a go of this beer. Very, very special.